Wow. Episode 0. Welcome to the East Troy Computer Club.
I think you did it backwards.
That's okay. Every time is going to be a little bit different, and I can't wait for people to go all the way back in the catalog to hear some of these early episodes. I have no idea where we're going to go, but it starts with today. Well, it started with -1. Hopefully, the real true fans of the Computer Club are going to find episode -1.
It's going to be hidden,
and they will be inspired.
Yeah, I think this episode's going to require a lot of cutting. The other one, I cut out a cat, and that was about it.
I think I'm going to be walking away today with quite a bit of information that I did not have. Yeah. Even though you and I have hung out in the same room before and had conversations on design and web development, we've never talked about today's topic. Do you want to elaborate on what that is?
Yeah, so I think it's actually a problem. Personally, I have a problem with this because every time I'm on a website, if there's text that's like a darker shade of blue and the background is black, I can't see it. And that's because I'm colorblind. And there's lots of men and women out there that are colorblind. And it got me thinking about just how accessible is the rest of software, I guess, and the web. And one question I had for you is, like, how do you as a designer choose what colors to use? And do you also cringe sometimes when you see websites where colors are just like completely off?
I've learned my design process usually starts with, I think all designers start with black and white when they first start. And as you you grow into your design style, it's very, very rarely do you ever pick pure black or pure white. But you start in those extreme contrasts and you work your way in. I think as designers, most designers that I know are pretty sensitive to warming up to their color palettes of choice. But I don't think that ever has any context into accessibility and what it is, how people are viewing their design work.
And what's interesting with, I guess, the color palette of choice is, like, for me, if I'm putting together a theme or a website, I tend to gravitate towards blue, like a softer blue with a lot of white. And I think that there's something behind it with my colorblindness on why I do that.
Do you think there's varying degrees of colorblindness, right? There's
3 or 4 different types. I don't remember the names. Most of them are red, like a red-green deficiency. And that means that the red and green cones in your eyes can't see the color as well. Or there's less cones, less red or green cones. I'll have to double check that. But what that means is that when like a dark purple or dark blue shows up and I have a hard time seeing it, is because that dark blue and dark purple have a little bit of red in it. And then it ends up blending with the other color.
Just having you talk about the different like color separation, like, so some color blindness, maybe you won't see as much red or as much green. Could you, as a designer, could I simulate what designs look like by, let's say, I can take out color channels in Photoshop or Infinity Photo, and will that give me like a pretty good simulation as to what you're seeing?
I think so.
How can we confirm that?
Yeah, you can't really test that because when you show me that simulated colorblindness, it looks completely different to how I actually perceive what real colors look like.
Right.
So how do you test for that? I think you just have to go with, I think you have to test colorblindness and other vision impairments with actual people that have that impairment. I think that's the only way to do it.
And that you have a wide spectrum of varying, a colorblind person, you have no way to confirm if you have the same, or maybe you do. Is there ways to measure the cones?
Yeah, there's ways to measure if what type of colorblindness you have. But even going back to testing with it, like if you were to test a bunch of colorblind people, and that sounds wrong, I guess. I don't know why.
Well, not really. You got to get a sampling of what,
yeah, if you were to sample a bunch of colorblind people on how your website or your application works, you might have people just providing feedback because they just don't like the way that the colors match up. Yeah. That information might not be useful initially, but who knows?
Interesting. So along those lines, when I'm designing, a lot of the detailing work that I put into my designs, namely web development, is in gradients and shadows. Are those sort of subtleties lost in color blindness? It's not necessarily
No.
color; it's more of a relative difference in lighting.
Yeah, I think the only time that the subtlety will be lost is, you remember like the Web 2.0 era where the gradients were very drastic, and you'd have very vivid sites where it'd be like going from blue to very dark blue, and it would be on a black background. Those types of transitions between buttons or elements is where it's going to be lost, I feel, for people that have color blindness or people that have a disability. And actually, when I was working at LPI, that's when I first started learning about like ARIA standards, which is the accessibility rich internet applications, and it came from W3C. And I didn't learn this until started researching this for the podcast, but a lot of the widgets that they were proposing, or a lot of the markup that they were proposing, was put into HTML5. So that's kind of cool. Not all of them. So there are still some things out there that you can look for that will help with accessibility. But the biggest things are kind of things that I think you and I look at and we're like, that's a joke, right? Like no one still does that. And that's things like alt tags on images. Which has always been, like, since 98, been hammered in, like, you have to have alt tags so the research engines can't find it.
Right.
Well, now it's interesting because it's like, well, you should have alt tags so the accessibility software can read it and see it. So that when someone's looking on a web page and they don't know what that image is, whether it's color blindness or some other disability, that they can see that it's a cheetah or a train or whatever.
Yeah, and not just a verbose value. Alt equals logo. Like
Right.
That's not going to help.
Right.
Actually, I could probably spin off a whole nother conversation on properly naming alternate namings for your elements.
Yeah, and how to come up with them.
I've never seen. I rarely see them named properly.
A lot of times for me, like for logos, it is literally, it does say logo.
Yeah.
And I put the name in it, so it's a logo East Troy Computer Club or East Troy Computer Club logo.
I often abuse them for SEO related reasons, not accessibility. It's not because it's just not in mind.
I think though, if you are paying attention to the accessibility part of it, you will get SEO out of it. And the case in point is I caption my YouTube videos that I put out there. And the reason for that wasn't for accessibility at the time. It was so that SEO could rank it. But I guess at the end, it was about accessibility.
So, going back to color, we're moving up higher and higher level. We have frameworks now. How does Bootstrap and Framework 7 and Material UI compare and add up to accessibility? If I pull down Bootstrap to use for my project, am I in a safer, more default, more compatible grounds of hosting a colorblind accessible website?
I think so, and not only just colorblind, but also just accessible website. And I think the reason why is because they're like Bootstrap's an open source project, and I think Framework 7 they're all open source projects. And you'll have people like me that are colorblind or other people that are disabled that are contributing to the project. So just by those people contributing to the project, they're going to make it more accessible to how they need it and how they need to see it.
Open source is absolutely a powerhouse feature in this regard, because here you are with varying degrees of accessibility challenges and motivations. You have the means to bring in those contributions.
Yeah. If you were to start your design career over, what would you incorporate now, accessibility-wise, or just general color theory lessons? What would you incorporate now, back when you were 17, 18?
That's a great question.
So this is 10 plus years ago.
Yeah. It's a very good question. I think just the awareness that we have now, what we don't have starting now is the history. I would hate to give up all the history and running alongside it for the last 10, 15 years. Just to figure out how to do it cleaner today. I think you can draw a lot on everything that you've learned to get here, RTFM all the way, right? Like, no matter what it was, I think we all stand to benefit from taking those lessons and really giving a damn as far as accessibility goes. I don't know what business I've never sat in on a meeting where we had ARIA or web accessibility as an agenda item.
The only time that I've been in on those meetings are the ones that I bring up myself as an agenda item. And the reason why I bring them up is because I'm looking for colorblind friendly solutions,
Mm-hmm.
and ARIA typically pops up, or accessibility pops up as a topic. And then I think it's interesting and bring it up to my boss, and we end up having a meeting. Typically, the meeting goes, yes, we should incorporate this somehow, and would you like to go through our website and then tell us what pages you're affected by? I mean, that's great, but what I would like to see it is, let's really have a select group of people that can go through the website and
Mm-hmm.
use it, or determine that they can't use it because of some disability. I think if I were to go back 10 or 15 years, I would choose themes that are more friendly, because I'm not a designer. I don't really make themes from scratch or websites from scratch. I'll pick a theme and then use it. I would choose themes that are more friendly for the accessibility standards. That's what I would do if I were to go back 10 or 15 years. I still don't think that I would change my approach to the problem, but I would definitely change which themes I'm picking and everything. It's kind of, actually, picking themes 10 or 15 years ago was different than now, even, because if you're going on ThemeForest or whatever website to pick a theme, you're looking for responsive first.
Right.
10, 15 years ago, it didn't matter.
Right.
So 10, 15 years ago, you're not looking for responsive first. You're just looking for what
Frames
visually,
versus not frames.
yeah, you're looking for what visually looks good.
Yeah.
So if you're a new designer, Ben, where would you go to make sure that you're designing websites and applications in an accessible manner?
Talk to you.
There you go. And I would tell you, Google it. I don't know.
Maybe what we should do on the show notes for this episode is link to there's color contrast checkers. Sometimes those are plugins for Adobe tools or whatever graphic tool you have. You might have a plugin or add-on that will test your contrast against the layers of your document.
And I think that's actually, if you're experienced too, you probably want to be looking at that stuff every now and then too, just to be cognizant of it. And if you're new to the East Troy Computer Club and this podcast, thank you for listening. So I think a good idea is to put a bunch of links and everything in the show notes. But thank you, everyone who has listened to the podcast. Please check out East Troy Computer Club at etcc.io. Oh, and the news.
The big announcement.
The big announcement
is the next meetup. Our next meetup will be hosted at our new home over at Michael Fields. They have a big, beautiful barn right across the street on Town Line Road from Martin's Do It Best and Frank's Piggly Wiggly.
And it's very accessible. I mean, you can't miss the barn. You go into Michael Fields, there's a big parking lot.
An elevator.
Yep, there's an elevator at Michael Fields. So we're going to have the meetings there. We're going to try recording presenters and everything else. And that kind of brings us...
The venue gives us a chance to turn up our presentations a bit. We get to be more mindful of going in a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
We have more visual reinforcements with, I think, multiple screens there. So we can get slide heavy and show off videos, and there's lots of workspace for show and tell.
That's what I'm excited for, the show and tell part of it. I'm also excited to try out like a YouTube live ETCC meetup. So publish it to YouTube and just kind of see who watches. We would like to have the next meetup maybe include a lot of the tinkers and a lot of people that are just working on something cool in East Troy or the surrounding area.
Probably the most appropriate thing to do for our very first meetup at Michael Fields is to make a call for tinkers. There are a few of you out there. There are a lot of us that have some really cool projects to show and tell. And I couldn't think of a better way to kick off a new kind of season and theme of the Computer Club than to kind of showcase all of the cool stuff that has gotten us here. In fact, one of the cool meetups in the past was a lockpicking meetup, and I intend to bring my grandfather out again to show us how to pick some even more challenging locks.
That would be cool. Thank you for listening to the podcast, guys. That wraps up that episode. Keep tinkering.
And push buttons.